Alex Liu woke up to the sound of his alarm blaring. With a groan, he slapped the snooze button, barely opening his eyes. It was just another morning, and Alex wasn't one for mornings. He dragged himself out of bed, rubbed his eyes, and stumbled into the bathroom. The world was blurry, one part sleep, one part caffeine withdrawal. As he brushed his teeth, he tried to focus on the day ahead, mentally ticking through his to-do list. Another day of overworked meetings and tedious emails. All things considered, Alex was just another soul grinding away in the corporate machine, but then something happened. As Alex brushed his teeth, his reflection did something. It wasn't the usual delayed mimicry of a mirror, where your actions slightly lag behind in the glass, but something off in the way it moved. For a split second, Alex thought he saw his reflection smile at him. "That's strange," he muttered under his breath, staring at the reflection. He gave a small, awkward grin back, half expecting it to mirror his movements as always. But instead, the reflection's smile widened unnaturally, as if it was a little too pleased with itself. Alex blinked, shook his head, and dismissed it as sleep deprivation or perhaps too much late-night binge-watching. He spit out the toothpaste, but his reflection, it didn't do the same. Instead, it seemed to pause for a moment, studying Alex with a kind of knowing amusement. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The mirror should be a mere reflection, nothing more. Confused, Alex rubbed his eyes, thinking he was seeing things. But when he opened them again, the reflection was still there, smiling. And then it did something that made Alex freeze. It winked at him. Alex's heart skipped a beat. That wasn't possible, was it? In disbelief, he took a step backward, only to find the reflection moving with him, but it wasn't copying his movements in the usual way. It was doing the exact opposite. When Alex stepped left, the reflection stepped right. When Alex flinched, the reflection grinned wider. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered aloud, now standing still and staring at the mirror in disbelief. He wasn't afraid, not yet. But something felt wrong, like a tiny cog in the universe had been nudged off its track. Then, without warning, Alex's own reflection reached out as if to touch the glass. And that was when it happened. The mirror rippled. Alex stumbled back, his heart racing. A strange, impossible sensation washed over him, like the room was spinning, like his whole body had just been yanked from one place to another. The bathroom lights flickered, and then, nothing. For a moment, he stood there, disoriented, trying to process what had just happened. The sound of his breathing was loud in his ears. He was still in the bathroom, but it felt different. It wasn't just the flickering lights. It was the air. It felt colder, thicker somehow. Like he was standing in a room that wasn't his. Alex took a step back, and as he did, his foot caught on something. He spun around, expecting to see the familiar sight of his apartment, but it wasn't his apartment. He was in a bedroom, but it wasn't his bedroom. His stomach lurched. He knew this place. He had been here before, but not like this. Not like now. He stood frozen for a moment, trying to collect his bearings. The bed in front of him, the paintings on the wall, the desk piled high with papers, he had seen it all before, but not from this perspective. This wasn't his room. Not even close. Confusion set in like an avalanche. He walked toward the window, feeling the cold floor under his feet as he moved. The view outside was unfamiliar too. A bustling cityscape, but not the one he remembered. And the reflection that stood in front of him in the mirror wasn't him anymore. It was a different man, someone he didn't recognize. Alex's mind scrambled to make sense of it. He reached up to touch his face, expecting the familiar features of his own skin, his own stubble. But instead, he felt smoothness, a face that wasn't his own. Panic started creeping in. "What the hell is going on?" he whispered. This wasn't a dream. No, it couldn't be. He was wide awake. And yet, he wasn't himself. His reflection, no, the person in the mirror, stared back at him. It wasn't the smirk of the man who had winked at him earlier. This was a different expression, one that was all too familiar in its unsettling calmness. It was a face he had seen in passing, in the elevator, at the coffee shop. Jared. Jared Wu, a software developer at his company. They'd exchanged the occasional nod, but they'd never spoken much beyond the pleasantries of office small talk. Jared was a quiet guy, but there was something off about him, a certain coldness that made him seem like he was always somewhere else, always thinking a step ahead. And yet, here Alex was, in his body. Alex stumbled backward, heart hammering in his chest. No. No, 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 this can't be happening. But it was happening. Somehow, Alex was in Jared's body, and he had no idea how or why. His mind raced, trying to piece together an explanation. The mirror? The strange feeling earlier, as if his reflection was playing tricks on him? Maybe he was going crazy. Maybe this was some twisted version of a lucid dream. But the more he thought about it, the more it felt real. Too real. Okay, calm down, Alex muttered, trying to steady his breathing. Think. What would Jared do? He stood there, staring at Jared's reflection in the mirror, trying to assess the situation. There was no panic, no immediate danger. At least, not from what he could tell. But the deeper questions loomed, those questions of why this was happening. How was it happening? Then, an involuntary shiver ran down his spine. There was a sharp sensation in his mind, a voice. It wasn't his own. Get it together, the voice said, calm and cold. Alex froze. The voice was Jared's. Alex's mind reeled. Was he hearing things? Or was Jared, whoever Jared was, still inside his head, somewhere, even though Alex was now occupying his body? He reached up and touched his temples, trying to shut it out, but the voice didn't stop. It spoke again, get dressed. You're going to be late for work. Alex stood there in stunned silence. He couldn't explain it, but somehow, it felt like Jared was still controlling his actions, even from the depths of his own mind. And, worst of all, it felt like the reflection in the mirror was smiling at him again, like it was fully aware of the situation, as if it had planned all of this from the beginning. Late for work? Alex muttered aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't be late for work. I don't even know how to. But the voice, Jared's voice, cut him off. You've got a meeting in 30 minutes. Get moving. The command snapped Alex back to reality, like the push of a button. He had no choice. As if on autopilot, he walked across the room and began to get dressed in Jared's clothes, his mind still spinning, still unsure of what was going on. Every movement felt alien, like he was operating in a dream. His hands pulled at the shirt, his fingers slipping into sleeves that didn't feel right. At that moment, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just in Jared's body, he was also in Jared's life. And somehow, as strange as it seemed, he felt like something was shifting within him, as if his own identity was starting to fray at the edges. It wasn't just the mirror. It wasn't just the body swap. Something deeper was happening. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Alex tugged at Jared's shirt, adjusting the cuffs as he stared at the mirror again, still in disbelief. The reflection of Jared, his reflection, looked back at him with a blank expression, his eyes hollow, like the man in the mirror had already given up on whatever was happening, as if it was just a matter of time before the whole thing unraveled. But Alex couldn't stop staring. It was as though he could feel something stirring behind his own eyes, a presence, or more like an absence, that wasn't entirely his. The voice in his head, Jared's voice, spoke again. Enough staring at yourself. You're running late. Do you know how to make coffee? Alex frowned, then nodded, the motion's automatic. Coffee. Of course. He walked toward the kitchen, reaching for the coffee machine. Jared's routine was already ingrained in him, every small movement feeling eerily familiar as he went through the motions. It was like he was learning to be Jared Wu in real time, but with each action, something inside him twisted, something that wasn't his own. The coffee machine hummed to life, and Alex poured water into the tank, then went to the counter and grabbed the coffee grounds. His hands moved on autopilot, but his mind kept flashing back to that strange moment in the mirror. Jared's reflection had smiled, like it knew something Alex didn't. It felt as though Jared was aware of his presence inside his body, and that was more unsettling than anything else that he hadn't wanted this. He didn't want to be Jared, but as the coffee machine sputtered to life, the voice in his head seemed to grow stronger. Get out of here. You'll be late. I don't care how many times you've done this, you're not in control. Alex clenched his fists, the growing pressure of the voice making his head feel like it was splitting. He leaned over the counter, trying to calm himself. Okay, he thought. Just focus. I need to get control back. This isn't Jared. This is me, Alex. I've just got to snap out of it. But then, the voice didn't let him. You'll never get control. I'm still here. Alex froze. He didn't just hear the words in his head. They reverberated through his chest, as if they were coming from inside him, from the body he was inhabiting. It was a sensation so real, so consuming, that it felt like he was choking on it. The coffee machine beeped, snapping him out of the spiral. He gripped the mug in his hands, but it felt wrong. The handle was too familiar, too smooth, and the texture of the ceramic was just a little too perfect. Everything in this life, Jared's life, felt like an illusion, a puzzle he couldn't piece together. And yet, it was his life now. At least for the time being, but that thought didn't make it any easier to breathe. He took the coffee and carried it to the living room, where he sat down in front of a laptop that wasn't his. Jared's laptop. His fingers hesitated for a moment over the keyboard, a shiver running down his spine. He knew what he was supposed to do. The workday was routine. Meetings. Reports. Emails. He could fake it until he figured out what was going on. As his fingers started typing, something flickered behind his thoughts. He could almost feel Jared's memories swirling around him, filling in the gaps. Jared's thoughts, his anxieties, his plans, his half-formed ideas, were leaking into Alex's consciousness, threading themselves into the fabric of his own mind. It was like someone had opened the floodgates, and now, Jared's life was pouring in. There was an email from someone named Emily, and Alex couldn't help but pause. The name tugged at something inside him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then pressed the mouse to open it. The email was brief, just a few sentences, but it sent a chill through Alex's chest. Are we still on for dinner tonight? You never responded to my last message. The familiarity of it hit harder than he expected. Emily? Who was she? Jared's ex-girlfriend? The words lingered in his mind. There was a history here, a personal connection Alex wasn't a part of, but one that was rapidly becoming part of him. As Alex sat there reading the email again, he felt a strange pull, like a tug at his subconscious. Emily wasn't just a name. She was a person who had lived in Jared's life, and now she seemed to be seeping into his. Before he could think too much about it, another thought emerged. This one wasn't his own. It was almost as if Jared had taken over for a split second. Call her back. Don't let her go. She's important. Alex blinked. The command was so forceful, so sudden, that he felt it like a physical punch in the gut. The voice had returned. Not in words, but in a sensation, a gut feeling that he couldn't ignore. Jared was still in his head. Alex stood up, hands trembling, his mind in a haze. He had to do something, anything, to regain control, but every move felt like it was being guided by the ghost of someone else. It wasn't just the reflection. It wasn't just the body. Jared's essence, his shadow, was slipping into Alex's thoughts, manipulating him from the inside. A knock on the door startled him, and Alex almost jumped out of his skin. He glanced toward the door, then at the time on the clock. It was almost time to leave for work. No more time to wonder about the voice, the reflection, or the tugging sensations in his chest. This was real. He had to face it. He walked toward the door and opened it to find a woman standing on the other side, smiling at him like she had been expecting this moment all along. Emily, she was the same woman from the email, the same woman whose name had been echoing in his mind. The same woman who had once been Jared's past, but who was now staring at Alex with a smile that was too familiar, too intimate. "Hey, stranger," she said softly, as though they'd just seen each other yesterday. Her eyes sparkled with some sort of shared history, something Alex wasn't ready to face. Hey," Alex stammered, swallowing hard, trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. The last thing he needed was for Emily to think something was wrong. But everything was wrong. She tilted her head slightly, then stepped into the apartment. "You okay?" she asked, looking him up and down. "You're looking a little off." Yeah, I'm fine," Alex said quickly. He couldn't help but feel like Jared's presence was everywhere now. She was inside his mind, too. Emily was part of this mess, and Alex couldn't get rid of her. The strange thing was, she didn't seem to notice anything was different. She didn't notice that Alex wasn't Jared. Not at all. Instead, she just smiled and walked into the living room, making herself at home as if nothing had changed. As Alex stood there, watching her, it occurred to him, Jared wasn't just in his body. He was inside his mind. And every moment that passed, every interaction he had, the deeper Jared's shadow grew. Suddenly, there was an intrusive thought, as if it had been planted there by an outside force, a voice that wasn't his. "Don't let her leave." "Not yet." Without even thinking, Alex walked to the kitchen, then grabbed the first thing that came to his mind, a bottle of wine from the counter. The movement was fluid, automatic, like his body had been taken over. He poured the wine for Emily, his hand trembling slightly. "Here," Alex said, handing her the glass. "How about we catch up?" Emily smiled warmly, but something in her gaze seemed to shift, as if she could feel the tension in the room. She didn't say anything, though. Instead, she took the glass and sat down on the couch, her eyes never leaving him. Alex's hand lingered over the bottle of wine as Emily took the glass from him. Her fingers brushed against his, and for a brief second, he felt a shiver run through him. It wasn't his reaction, though. It was something deeper, something cold and unfamiliar, like the ghost of a feeling that wasn't his own. He pulled his hand away quickly, swallowing hard. "Thanks," Emily said, settling back into the couch, her eyes flickering up at him with an unreadable expression. "So, what's been going on with you, Jared? You've seemed distant lately." Her question sent a jolt through Alex's chest. Jared, or rather the ghost of Jared, still clung to him like a shadow. He could almost feel the weight of his previous self, the man who had once lived this life, standing beside him, pushing him, urging him to answer. Alex tried to steady himself. "I'm just tired, you know. Work has been a lot lately." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He wasn't sure what the truth even was anymore. Emily studied him for a moment, and Alex could feel her gaze digging deep, searching for the cracks. She knew something was off. She had to. "Jared," she said, her voice softer now, "you've been avoiding me. And I don't think it's just work. I know you too well." The words hit Alex like a punch. His heart raced, and the air between them grew thick. He had to say something. But what? He wasn't Jared. Not anymore. The voice of Jared flared up in his head again, sharp and insistent. "Don't let her see. She'll figure it out. Don't let her leave. You need her. She needs you." Alex opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out right. The voice, it was growing louder, more insistent. The longer he stayed in Jared's body, the more it felt like Jared's mind was suffocating him, pressing against his thoughts, pushing him into the corners of his own consciousness. I'm sorry," he finally said, the words sounding strange on his tongue. "I've just been going through a lot." He didn't know if the words were his own or if they were just something Jared would have said. Maybe we can talk about it, later. But Emily was quiet now, her eyes narrowing. She didn't look convinced, and Alex could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on him. "Jared," she said softly, leaning forward. "You don't have to lie to me. I can tell something's wrong. I know you. And I know you're not the same as you were a few weeks ago." That hit hard. It was like a recognition, a mirror held up to Alex's fractured mind. The woman across from him wasn't seeing Jared anymore. She was seeing someone else. Someone who wasn't quite the man she thought she knew. Alex's chest tightened. What am I supposed to say? But the answer wasn't his to give. "You've changed," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if it's the stress, or something else, but whatever it is, Jared, I don't like it." The words stung, but there was something else in them. A question. A recognition that he wasn't Jared. That Alex wasn't the person who had lived this life, who had built these memories. He was an outsider, just as confused and trapped as she was. "Emily," Alex finally said, his voice wavering. I'm not who you think I am." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Emily stared at him, her expression unreadable. Alex could feel the weight of his confession hanging in the air, but he didn't know if he was ready for what came next. Her eyes softened. "What do you mean, Jared?" she asked, her voice full of concern now. "Are you?" Before she could finish the question, the voice in Alex's head roared, sharp and violent. "No." The force of the thought slammed into him like a physical blow. His whole body jerked in response. He could almost feel Jared's shadow trying to take control, to silence Alex's voice. It was a war inside his mind, a battle for dominance, and Jared was winning. Alex clutched the edge of the couch, his knuckles white. His breath came in shallow gasps as the urge to push Emily away, to force her out of the apartment, to make her forget all of this grew stronger, but there was something else inside him, something more than just the panic. It was an echo of himself, a fragment of his own identity that fought against the flood of Jared's thoughts. It was small, weak, but it was there. And for the first time since the soul-swapping started, Alex felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't completely lost. "Not yet. I'm not Jared," he said, his voice barely a whisper now. "I'm someone else. Someone who shouldn't be here." Emily didn't seem to hear him. Or maybe she didn't want to. She was still staring at him, her eyes wide, her face pale. Something had shifted in her, too. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, as if searching for the right words, but she couldn't find them. The room was thick with tension, the silence growing heavy between them. "Jared, what's happening to you?" she asked quietly. The question lingered in the air, but Alex didn't have an answer. He couldn't even answer it for himself. He felt like he was being torn apart from the inside out. Jared's consciousness was eating away at him, and the longer he stayed in Jared's body, the more it seemed like Jared was coming back. The voices swirled in his mind again, and Alex staggered back. No, I won't let you. I won't become you." But it was too late. The reflection in his mind wasn't his own anymore. It was Jared's, and then, as if to confirm it, the memory slammed into him. A scene from Jared's past, a memory that wasn't Alex's, but one that felt real. Jared had been sitting in a cafe, laughing with Emily, holding her hand. The warmth in that moment, the love, the comfort, it all felt so familiar. Alex's head spun. That wasn't him. That wasn't his memory. But it felt like his body, his mind, was bending toward it, trying to take it in as his own. "Jared?" Emily asked again, her voice cracking. The presence of Jared was overwhelming now. Alex could feel him, feel his influence, pushing through, trying to reclaim his body, his identity, and in that moment, Alex realized the truth. The soul-swapping wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a slow, insidious process. Every time he switched, every time he inhabited a new body, a new mind, part of him stayed behind, leaving a fragment, an echo, behind in the host's consciousness. These fragments, these shadows, were taking root, growing stronger, pushing him further away from who he once was. From who he wanted to be. There was no easy way out. "I'm not Jared," Alex whispered again, though it felt like the words were slipping through his fingers, but in that moment, Emily's face changed. The confusion in her eyes shifted into something else, something darker. She stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said, her voice low. "But you're not him. You're not Jared." The words hit Alex like a slap to the face. He wanted to argue, to convince her that he was still Alex, that this was all just a mistake. But the truth was, there was no me left. Just echoes of memories, fragments of souls bleeding into each other, and just like that, Jared's shadow in his mind seized control. With one final push, Alex could feel the last piece of himself slipping away. Jared's life was no longer just a part of him. It was him, the voice that had been tormenting him, pulling him under, now fully consumed him. "You're mine now." Alex's eyes, Jared's eyes, locked onto Emily's. He couldn't stop it. The man he had once been, the person who had lived this life, was no more. The reflection in the mirror, the echo in his mind, it was Jared. And it felt like he had won.